Hello everyone, this is International Master Robert Jamieson from Kids Unlimited in Melbourne, Australia. And I thought today we'd have a look at a short game by Magnus Carlsen, the world champion. Now, clearly you learn how to improve by playing through games of stronger players. And Magnus, you would imagine most of the time, he just grinds his opponents down in a long end game from equal position. That seems to be his main strategy. But when the mood takes him, he can attack just as well as anybody else, if not better. So let's have a look at this short attacking game where Magnus wipes the floor with a 2800 Grandmaster. Now, general principles of attacking. So what you usually need is firstly more space that enables you to maneuver your men more readily to where you want to attack. Then probably more attackers than defenders is a great thing. Then you identify the weak point where you're attacking, the focus of your attack. Maybe you might have to do a sacrifice to open up the king to get a checkmate, but you've got more attackers than defenders, so that's no big deal. And you win. So let's see how Magnus goes about it. He's playing white. He exchanged on d5. It's interesting. He seems to like to clarify the pawn structure early from what I've seen. A lot of people would play knight f3 or e3 and keep the tension on with the pawn structure, but Magnus wants to clarify it. And we've transposed into a Tarrasch variation of the Queen's Gambit, where white has an isolated pawn on d4. So this usually means that white has more space and perhaps attacking chances, but black has a weak pawn, and in particular a weak square in front of the pawn. So if he can establish a knight there, that's positionally good for black. All right. Most people would probably play knight c6 here, or perhaps bishop e7 or something. But black decides to take, which strengthens white's centre. The b pawn's now moved in, supporting the formerly isolated d pawn. But this pawn is now a weak point, which black attacks. Right, have a little think. If you were Magnus, what would you play here? So white to play. He's threatening queen takes pawn, check, winning a pawn. I think were it me, I'd just play bishop d2 or something fairly simple like that. But Magnus plays rook b1. Would you like a free pawn with check? Interesting. Now, one of the things to bear in mind is if you are the stronger player, naturally the pressure is on you to win, and a lot of players will try to draw with you by just keeping it simple and swapping off. So one of your main jobs is to unbalance the position. So that could be through a sacrifice, a positional sacrifice perhaps, or you getting a bishop and he's got a knight, some material imbalance, something like that. So Magnus here is trying to unbalance the position by saying, would you like a free pawn? And maybe I get a bit of development for it. Take the pawn, I play bishop d2. I've got my men out. Black's a little bit careful. He thinks, well, you know, we're playing the world champion. Is it a free pawn or could be a bit risky? So he plays knight d7. Now, I think this position's occurred 3 times before, and Magnus now plays a move that no one has ever played before. So have a think. What would you play if you were white? Black can still play queen takes c3 check if you don't defend that pawn. Again, I'd probably play bishop d2, maybe bishop b2, or you could have a look at c4. But Magnus says, I'm just going to develop my bishop. Would you like that pawn with check? And now I can't play bishop d2 because they will take the bishop on d3. So his opponent, Dada, says, all right, fair enough. Free pawn with check, and now you can't even castle. Okay, so we have definitely unbalanced the position. Black has a pawn up and has 2 pieces out. White has more space and has 3 pieces out, but he can't castle. So you would have thought this is a bit dodgy. All right, let's see what happens. Black just develops his bishop. He's going to castle and say, ha ha, I'm a pawn up. All right, so we probably need to do something fairly aggressive and quickly. So put yourself in Magnus's shoes. How can he get an attack going? So you have more space, you have more development. So you have to focus where you're going to attack. Is it going to be the queen side, the center, or the king side? And how can you activate your men in that area? All right, have a little think. What would you do? Magnus chose h4. So clearly his idea is he can't castle. So how does he get the h rook into the game? So the rook's probably going to come out here. All right, black just castles. Now rook here. Now white has a sneaky threat here. Can you see it? Because when your opponent makes a move, your first job is to say, what is he threatening? All right, that's fairly obvious that if it's white's go, we've got check, takes, check, and we win black's queen. All right, so black says, all right, so I will protect that pawn with the knight, so I can recapture with the knight if you sack the bishop. All right, white to play. So now we need to focus on getting our men close to his king and more men out there. For the next move, knight e5. All right, now he has not blundered a pawn because, again, obviously, if queen takes pawn, free queen. So black has to think about his queen because now we are threatening bishop takes pawn check again. And black runs away over here. So the good thing about this from white's point of view is that black's main piece, most important piece, is on the queen side, miles away from the king. And these two pieces aren't in it. Though black's king looks nice and safe. He's got 3 defenders and a nice safe pawn chain. So let's ask ourselves, what is the weak point? What square do we think we want to attack or build up on or threaten? What's the weak point? I think it's probably G7 at the moment. So Magnus's move, rook G3. All right, now he's probably threatening bishop here. It's not the end of the world, maybe we can go here. But we're getting our pieces out really quickly. So what does black play? He could perhaps play rook here, so that removes the threat. Or we can just go here perhaps. Rook d8 would be possible. But he decides king in the corner. Looks a little bit dodgy because our king is by himself in the corner, and that's not a developing move or anything. All right. But it does remove the threat of bishop h6. So let's ask ourselves again. So is G7 still the weak point, or is there perhaps a different weak point now that the king has moved? I would think maybe H7 could be the weak point. Now, of course, you say, well, hardly weak. It's defended by the knight and the king, only attacked once by the bishop. But Magnus's next move, bishop G5. So he's threatening the defending knight. So, for instance, if it was Magnus's go, he could have a look at takes, queen here, threatening mate. And if either pawn here or pawn here, doesn't much matter, say pawn here, then go check. And look, we've won black's queen. All right, so it's a bit of a threat. What does black do? Go away, bishop, or take me. So he's removed the weak point on h7. But the thing about moving pawns in front of your castle king is that the safest structure is normally the 3 pawns side by side there, because if one of them is attacked, you just moved it and it's defended by its buddies. Whenever you move one forwards, like we've just done here, it creates a potential target or a potential weak point. So you have to be careful. All right, anyway, put your thinking cap on. Magnus's next move is a pretty cool move. What would you play? Well, bishop's attacked. Maybe that's no big deal. Maybe you could leave it there, because if he takes, you open up the H file and get plenty of interesting attacks on the H file. All right, but Magnus said, all right, I'm not messing about. I'm opening up your king. Thank you for moving your H pawn. All right, pretty much got to take, otherwise you're a pawn down with an airy king. Now we need to be a little bit careful. So we've opened up the king. We've created a new weak point now, this pawn here. What is your next move? What is your next move? You're attacking with a rook, a knight, and a bishop at the moment. All right, have you decided? I think some of you probably said Queen C1, attacking the weak point. The trouble there is maybe he defends with the knight. And if, for instance, we go takes, threatening checkmate here, and we're rook down, then we might have to go for perpetual check. So not Queen C1, the immediate threat, but the more obtuse Queen F3. A rather good move, because it's still threatening to get the queen on the diagonal and take on H6. Now we can't clearly move the knight back, because knight takes pawn check is going to be fairly catastrophic. We could play queen here, but we just chase the queen away. We could play queen here if we really want to play on, and if Magnus plays here, give up our queen and try and hang on, but Magnus is clearly well ahead on material. Queen for 2 pieces would have been fairly comfortable. So his opponent simply resigned. So there you go. Magnus played what seemed to be a rubbish opening, just giving away a free pawn with check on C3, and he wiped the floor with a 2800 player in 18 moves. Okay, so I hope you've learned a little bit from that, and maybe one day you too can attack like Magnus. Thanks, and see you next time.